We wanted to do a quick question from one of the questions that I got on Writers. I thought it'd be good to, just kind of make a video on it. It's a question that I think will benefit a little bit from actually having spoken words instead of being, written down. Also save me a little time from, just so I can focus on other writing that I should be doing, but I'm not doing, which is why I'm asking for questions, which is what I usually do every year in November. But anyway. Great Faye sends in writing question. I often hear and support messages just encouraging writers to write that story that makes the inside of their skulls itch, even if someone else has done that kind of story before. But I'm in a pickle. During one of the recent hurricanes, I came up with a story idea. I was inspired by the powerlessness I felt at the moment, with a very specific theme to explore and a very specific dynamic. And now I've learned there's already a book that nailed this idea. Should I abandon it? So the quick answer to your question is no, you should not. Let's get a little more detail though, because that isn't enough to really clarify that. So yes, somebody else has written a book that nails your idea. And you could say that for any book that comes out, right? There are no new ideas. I mean, you can have new approaches and new character ideas and bring in things that tie in more with the modern age, but that story has been written before. We've been writing stories for so long, right? It's something that is not unique. Now, what is unique is what you bring to the story. So as you write this story, you need to focus on things that you bring to the story. Who are your characters? Why do they feel this hopelessness? Why do they have this theme in their story that you're presenting, right? So even though the other person that you've seen this book for has nailed your idea and your concept, that doesn't mean that you can't bring your own idea and sensibility into that story. In fact, if you don't make that happen, then what's the point of you being a writer? Sorry, that's rude. But what I'm trying to say is that in order to be an effective writer, you need to put out ideas, and you need to explore those ideas in a way that is beneficial. And if you're not willing to write a story just because you saw another story like the one that you want to write, then you're not doing your job, right? So this idea is in your head, right? And unless they have the exact same characters and the exact same locations and the exact same story that you're going to write, then your story has not been written. And you can bring this in to this idea. So give me a second to think about an example of what I want to talk about. All right, so I'm actually going to start off with an example that isn't really fair, but with the second Star Wars movie coming out, how can I resist a chance to talk about the Star Wars movies? So when you look at the original Star Wars movie, currently called A New Hope, and the most recent Star Wars movie, not Rogue One, but wow, I'm drawing a blank on it. But anyway, you know what I mean. One with Daisy Ridley and all the cool people, right? So one of the biggest critiques of that movie is the fact that it's so much like A New Hope. Like it's on a desert planet and there's some abandoned kid there and they're, dinking around on the Millennium Falcon and, all these things are the same, a giant space ball that's going to blow up everything. It's all the same kind of. But at the same time, even though it's so much like A New Hope, it's not the exact same thing. Right? The Force Awakens, yes, I did remember it finally. But The Force Awakens takes those ideas and those sensibilities and the stuff that you know so well because you've seen, that first Star Wars movie so many times. But even though you know the story and you know where it's going to go, you don't know all the details. So it's a story that exists and it's there. But you're going to do something over here that's just enough different that even though somebody might look at it and go, oh yeah, that reminds me of this story, it's not the exact same story because The theme is the same, right? Your idea of what the theme should be is the same as this story, but you're not writing this story. You're not doing copy paste. You're not taking somebody else's idea and just making it enough different to be your own. You're taking this idea that you had and you're seeing what someone else did with your concept, and then you're making your own sensibility and your own product. Okay? Now, let me think again. All right, so let's take another example, though, of something that is based on the same stories, but done in a different enough way that it becomes something new. So take as an example the legend of Arthur, right? The King of England, the one true king, Excalibur, Mordred and Lancelot and Guinevere and Merlin, all these things going on, right? So when those stories were compiled and pulled together from all these different sources, they were put into a book, and then somebody else said, well, yeah, that's a cool book, but I'm going to make another book. And somebody else said, I'll make another book. And they started picking pieces of all the different books, and they put them all together, and they made one giant mess, honestly. There's nothing that combines everything. And then you get different authors that pull from the different sources, and they bring them into their different things. For example, if you read the Dark is Rising series by Susan Cooper, so much of that ties in with that Arthurian legend. In fact, in part of the story, you get to see King Arthur for a little bit. So that also ties in with this, that you can have the same themes and concepts. When the Morte d'Arthur was written, he had a focus that he wanted to focus on, this theme of Arthur and chivalry, and this quest for the Holy Grail, and all these different things. And other authors that compiled the stories had the same thing. And when Mark Twain wrote A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, it kind of came back to that idea, but also just kind of thumbed his nose at it, and said, hey, let's look at this from a different perspective, right? So with your story, with your theme that ties in with that sense of hopelessness that you talked about and the hurricanes that inspired it, you're taking that story and you're looking at it from a different perspective, right? So, and again, the story is different because your characters are different and the setting is different. The theme is the same, and sure, the other author hit the theme right the way that you wanted to. But that doesn't mean that you can't do the same thing in your own story with your own characters. As long as you're not copying and pasting his story, nobody can say, well, let me step back. People can say that you stole the idea. Somebody's going to say that. But is it true? No. Because you came up with you had the concept. And you have, nobody owns a theme. Right? You can't be like, oh, my theme is pickles are awesome. I don't know. That could be your theme. And if somebody else wrote a book about pickles being awesome, that doesn't mean that they stole your idea. They just had your same silly idea. Don't make the big, well, if you want to try and make a book about pickles being awesome as the theme, that's great. More power to you. I will read that book. Just let me know where it is, and I'll track it down, and I'll read it. But my suggestion is not to try that. Come up with actual themes. Talk about the oppression of technology over modern man. The separation that's caused by watching too much television. There's all kinds of cool themes you can come up with. However, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the theme of hopelessness. Sorry about that. For your story, then, sit down and make sure, look over the story again that you're seeing as having your theme. Look over that story. Make sure that you are aware of what's happening in it and how it draws into that theme. And then come back to your story and say, how can I make this mine? How can I ignore this or at least, not draw heavily from this and make this story my own. Who are my characters that are important to it? What is the location that's different from this location that's going to make my story its own thing, right? So if you're focused on, how your story is your story, then you can avoid that feeling that you have used somebody else's idea, right? You had this idea, you have this concept, make it your own, and you'll be fine. Best of luck.